couple of quick observations before we chat about the book. My family and I live in Barnardsville. Anybody familiar with Barnardsville? Right? Little town, no stoplights, lots of farm animals. One other thing, I can fully support Frank's, hey Frank, account of Miami. As you can tell from my thick North Carolina accent, I'm not originally from here. We, in fact, were South Florida natives, and everything Frank said is true. And for that reason, my wife and I decided about a dozen years ago that it was time to get out of Dodge. So we moved here to Asheville, North Carolina, purely for quality of life reasons. And it took us about 5 minutes to get used to it, and I've loved it ever since. So we have a hobby farm. For those of you that don't know what a hobby farm is, it means we shelter, feed, doctor all kinds of animals, and we don't make any money off of it. That's a hobby farm. Okay? So the book, Sheep and Shuttles, is it has two folds to it. One is it tells of amusing true stories that happened on our hobby farm, and then it ties it together, each one of those stories together, with life and leadership lessons. And it's meant to be extremely entertaining, but yet at the end of the day have some valuable lessons that you can internalize. So with that said, I'm going to read you a little bit of chapter 8 in the book. And by the way, I was thinking the other day, what chapter should I read? And I happened to bump into, in the post office, one of the gentlemen who is mentioned in chapter 8, and I go, I'll read that chapter. So, do you all know what a guard animal is before I start on this chapter? A guard animal is an animal you purchase to integrate with your flock to protect them from predators, such as coyotes and such. Okay? With that said, after cycling through various guard animals to protect our growing flock of sheep, we were again on the lookout for a protector. During a casual conversation with my neighbor Mike, a born and bred local whose practical knowledge I have relied upon as we flatlanders adjusted to mountain life, he happened to mention that emus make excellent guard animals. As fate would have it, within a week I spotted an ad in the newspaper for a pair of emus and could not resist the temptation to add these unique birds to our menagerie. In case you're wondering, an emu is an Aussie version of an ostrich and a member of the rat-type family, which includes various large flightless birds. Full grown, they are over 6 feet tall and weigh about 150 pounds. They have excellent eyesight and hearing and can reach speeds of 35 miles per hour. Their extremely powerful legs are their main defense mechanism. They are naturally curious and generally friendly to humans. In short, they are everything you could ask for in a garden. And if by some chance they don't work out, and you don't have some silly self-imposed rule about not eating your pets, they are delicious. The owner of the emus, Jennifer, graciously agreed to deliver them to us. I anxiously waited at the bottom of our property, which butts up to the main road. This fenced-in area contains a small pond, a lean-to, and at the time, our flock of sheep. It is one of the few areas within our 20 acres that is relatively flat. Jennifer pulled onto our road and expertly backed up the horse trailer she was towing right to our cattle gate. 30 seconds later, with our gate and the trailer door open, the two prehistoric-looking rat-tights nonchalantly waltzed into their new home. With much amusement, I watched them roam about exploring their new domain. In case you have never seen an emu before, picture Big Bird after having a nose job and becoming the champion on The Biggest Loser. The pair seemed to be fitting in well, striking the proper balance between being protective of the flock and friendly to the family. They second bonus point, excuse me, they also score bonus points for making excellent conversation starters with neighbors and guests. With that in mind, I was not immediately concerned when a yet unacquainted neighbor from about a quarter of a mile down the road called me about 2 weeks after the emu's arrival. "Are you the one that just got a pair of emus?" the elderly country gentleman said. With a detectable level of pride in my voice, I replied, "Yes, I am." "Well, I thought you might know. They just ran by my house." Pride instantly turning to stunned confusion, I thanked the kindly fellow and hung up. I quickly realized that I had not given any thought on how I would ever catch a pair of 150-pound birds running 35 miles an hour down the street. I immediately called my neighbor Mike. The phone rang once, and the familiar voice answered, "You have to sneak up behind them and grab them by the neck." Now my head was really spinning. How did he know what I was calling about? How am I going to sneak up on these sensory-gifted birds? What will happen when I grab one of these powerful giant fowl by the neck? I tried to calm myself. Okay, step one, go find them. I donned my Aussie hat, hopped into our SUV, and drove a little over a quarter of a mile down the road before I spotted who I assumed to be the gentleman caller. He pointed me further down the road as I slowly passed, gesturing a sincere thank you to him. I soon came upon a gruff-looking chap with a puzzled expression standing on the side of the road, looking through an open gate towards a quaint stone house. As I pulled alongside him and lowered my window, I uttered a question that would either lead to finding my AWOL guard birds or an anonymous call to the police regarding a possible escaped psych patient. "Hello, sir. Have you seen 2 6-foot-tall birds running down the street?" "I think they're in my yard," the chap responded, motioning towards the stone house. In his speech and on his breath, I detected a good early afternoon beer buzz. I also sensed that he was struggling to determine whether the critters doing laps around his house were a hallucination brought on by consuming of copious quantities of fermented malts and hops, or he was an unwitting participant in some reality show involving exotic animals and hidden cameras. "What are those?" my newly acquainted neighbor asked with a complete absence of southern drawl, indicating to me he was not from these parts. Mustering up my best, albeit poor, country accent, I replied, "Why, them are North Carolina chickens. We grow them big here." Despite his slightly altered state and understandable confusion over the scene in front of him, he found the intended humor in my smart-ass remark and chose not to shoot me or the enormous chickens for the time being. As we deliberated over the situation, it was obvious there were 2 challenges at hand. First, how do we capture the critters? Second, how do we transport them back home? For a brief moment, I envisioned a solution involving a lasso and saddle, but I realized that my lack of lassoing experience was only dwarfed by my lack of emu riding experience. I concluded that Mike's advice to sneak up behind them and grab them by the neck was slightly more prudent at the moment, so my thoughts turned to transportation. It was obvious that they would not fit into my rodeo without messy alterations to the SUV or the birds. Note to self, next vehicle must be equipped with a sunroof. "You can use my van if you like," the temporary landlord of my runaway rat tights graciously offered as he pointed to the right rear corner of his half-acre lot. There heaped the remnants of what appeared to be a minivan. As I drew closer, I'm fairly sure I could make out Lee Iacocca's handprint on what was left of the right front fender on this 1984 Dodge Caravan that surely was the first one to roll off the Chrysler assembly line. "Does it run?" I asked, doing my best to be respectful of his generous offer. "So long as you don't try to go above second gear and give yourself plenty of stopping distance. You'll be fine, he replied. The plan now taking shape, I had a momentary flashback of Dr. Peter Venkman exclaiming, "I love this plan. I'm excited to be a part of it." Realizing that Ghostbusters and my Emu taxi were produced in the same year gave me much needed added confidence. In a Pavlovian effort, I vigorously shook the coffee can containing the feed I had brought along. Seeing I got the bird's attention, I sprinkled some of the feed on the ground and sauntered away nonchalantly in an attempt to convince my prey that I had absolutely no intention of choking them into submission. As I watched them stride over and gobble up the feed, I circled back around behind them and stealthily, as an aboriginal hunter, well, in my own mind anyway. Apparently the big bird duo were not as oblivious to my approach as I had hoped. When I got within 5 feet of them, they swiftly took 2 graceful steps and tripled the distance between us. This scene repeated itself several times. It was as if they had some super bird sensory perception that predicted my every move. Discouraged but not defeated yet, I swore that if I was somehow successful in capturing my runaways, I would never again use the term bird brain. I was running low on bait and patience. I needed a new approach. I decided to attempt to entice them into the rear corner of the yard, where the fencing would serve to cut off their means of egress. I scattered some of the remaining feed within a foot of the corner post and backed away. The pair again approached and greedily consumed their treat. As I moved in closer, I focused on the one nearest me and lunged with outstretched arms towards his neck. With the fencing drastically narrowing his exit, my quarry hesitated for a second, which gave me enough time to close the gap and grip both hands around his neck. My feathered friend instinctively ran effortlessly, dragging his 180-pound attacker across the yard. My experience as a wrestler and a martial artist had no apparent value under these circumstances, and all I could think to do was to hold on tight. After a continuous battle that seemed to last longer than the last 2 minutes of an NBA game, the not-so-gentle giants tired sufficiently for me to guide him into the open side of the door carefully. I stumbled back to the front of the yard, sweat-soaked, out of breath, jeans muddy, shirt torn, hat dangling, and abdomen lacerated, hoping nobody witnessed me just getting my ass kicked by Big Bird. I have 2 favors to ask. 2 favors to ask. One is read the rest of the book, and I hope you enjoy it. And 2, completely off topic, if you're not entirely happy with the way things are going on lately in our government, get out May 6th and vote in the primary. And if you happen to see my name on the ballot, consider voting for me. Thank you.